Hello, this is a recording for those who couldn't make the live version, but we'll go through all the same materials we did before, and hopefully you can make the next one, or we'll do this again sometime. So I'm Carolyn Mullins. I work here at 12 Points. I've been working here for 2 years. I graduated college May of 2024, and I am passionate about educating people on personal finance. And that's why I love this job because I'm able to work with not just so many different types of people and learn everything about their families and their lives and what they do, but I also get to educate them on very important financial concepts. And as important as money is, it's great to learn these concepts at a young age. And that's where Joey and I come in as teaching and making sure our clients' kids are set up for success. And Joey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. I'm Joey Belsanti. I've been at 12 Points for going on 4 years now, I think, starting as an intern and then joining after graduating from Bryant University in May 2025. I work on the wealth management and business advising teams here at 12 Points. And I also founded and lead our nonprofit called 12 Points Academy, where we work primarily with college and high school students preparing them for the real world through financial education and professional development, getting them ready for success. So I really enjoy I really enjoy educating people on really all aspects of finances because it's really important. It affects every aspect of your life, I believe, and the school systems really don't touch upon it as much as they should, we believe. So I really love translating complex financial topics to either young people or people who really don't have a finance background. So I'm looking forward to today, where Carolyn and I will really dive into what we consider building your financial foundation, covering the basics, and then next session we'll build off of that as well.
Yep, and we've got a deck here to guide our conversation today. And we'll throw in any questions that some of the participants may have asked us when we did this live.
Awesome. Let me share the screen here. Can you see that, Carolyn?
It's loading. There you go. Now I can.
Awesome. So during a session, this is the time when Carolyn and I would pause and ask the students or the attendees really um, any questions or thoughts or topics that are of that are of interest to them or questions that they have, and then we would be able to weave those into what we already have prepared. We don't like going solely off of the slides we have. We really like to hear from the people we're talking to and hear what's important to them, what they need help with the most. And then we're able to take that into consideration and try to weave it into what we already have built into this deck. But considering this is a recording, we will hop right into it. And some of those usual topics, and Carolyn, please add into this,
Mhm.
have been preparing for the high school, the college transition, or the college to real world transition. Um, Also planning for my parents aren't going to be covering my expenses anymore. What should I do to prepare myself for that? Or let's say I have a couple $1,000s in my checking account. What should I do with that? Where should that go? Is there anything else that comes to your mind, Carolyn?
And then there was a couple questions that we'll actually cover our next session on credit cards
Mhm.
and basics of investing. So debt management, that'll be all covered next time, or there'll be a recording just like this.
Awesome. So today, like I mentioned, we will be discussing how to build our financial foundations, really the floor to which we can build off of. And what that entails is a discussion regarding budgeting, which I personally really don't like the word budget. I think it carries a negative connotation. People just hate when you bring up budgeting, and that's really when people discuss financial literacy, a lot of it has to do with budgeting. And that's why I feel like people don't really engage purposely with their finances or financial education. So we instead kind of flip it into cash flow mapping, how to actually map and deal with our cash flow, our net take home pay income. Then we'll dive into paychecks, actually looking at a pay stub, and then where should the money that we're bringing in, our net take home pay, where should we be putting that so it's going towards um, our goals, going to best use, making every dollar work for us. And then we'll end with some action items. It's not just good enough to listen here and observe, but we to see the work or to see the results that we're hoping for. We actually need to put some work in, and that's where we'll give everyone some action items to actually implement into their lives. So our financial foundation, when discussing what we need to cover first, what that looks like is covering our everyday needs, covering say rent, covering food costs, expenses, covering gas, covering clothing. Um, and we achieve that. We achieve covering our everyday needs through mostly savings, through determining how much of our net take home pay, which we'll get to in a second, should go towards savings, should go towards fulfilling our everyday needs, fulfilling that bucket. Once we're able to satisfy that bucket and build up an amount that's able to fulfill our everyday needs, we can then build off of that and look towards building wealth, building financial freedom. Once we are able to build financial safety, that's what really our foundation is, financial safety. We're able to then look towards financial freedom through building wealth, and we use investments or getting involved in the market to accomplish that. So being intentional with our money, that's the first step to really building financial safety. So we like to start with something that we hear a lot from either high school students or especially college students who are a few years away from graduating, entering the real world, and most likely getting a job offer of some sorts. And on that job offer, there'll be a salary number on there. And what we hear often is, oh, my job offers for 60,000, 75, 70,000, $80,000, and people actually believing that's how much they will be taking home at the end of the day. However, that's really not how it works. That's not what happens in reality. Now, unfortunately, because of direct deposit, or maybe fortunately, who knows, but because of direct deposit and a lot of automation, uh, students today, the young generation, they haven't really seen a physical pay stub or held one in their hands. So they may not understand what is actually being taken out of their paycheck. Here we have an example of a paycheck, a pay stub, where there's a few important areas we want to pay attention to: earnings, gross pay, and then deductions, and also net pay at the end. So, Carolyn, would you mind taking us through these different sections and what's most important to consider?
Yeah. So starting with the earnings, you should be able to see your rate of how much you're getting paid and the hours. So here we have someone making $15 an hour, and then that's two 40-hour work weeks on this pay stub, which is a traditional full-time job is 40 hours a week. So $15 an hour for 80 hours over the course of 2 weeks. They are making $1,200 this pay period. But the catch is, and what Joey was saying of you're not really making $1,200. A lot of this is actually immediately taken out just like that with very little influence. You have very little influence on it, is taxes, and everyone's got to pay them. It's the way our government works, and there's not much to do about changing these line items. It just is what it is, but this is one of the reasons we encourage people to go online and find that pay stub, because even if you have direct deposit, you should be able to find something like this somewhere out there in the world and kind of see, how much did I make and then how much am I taking home. So the taxes, if we go through those first deductions, income tax, that's the federal income tax that you're paying to the whole country's government. And then there's a state income tax where that kind of varies state to state. Joey and I are in Massachusetts, it's 5%, but other states like Florida don't have any state income tax. So that could fluctuate depending where you are. Social Security and Medicare, these are also a form of taxes. They're a government program that workers like us are paying into, and then we get to use these benefits in retirement. So it's not really something you need to worry about now, but it's something you can't really avoid, and you're going to pay into through your pay stub like everyone else is. Next, under other, there's a bunch of different other deductions that can come out of your pay stub. The most popular, we would say, are health and dental insurance. Usually, people most commonly are covered under their parents until they're 26. But after that, or under different circumstances, you might need to pay for health insurance, and that'll come directly out of your paycheck. And it's very important. Everyone needs that as well. So these are all kind of things that are tough to get around. The retirement, and where it says 401k, this is actually an elective deduction compared to maybe some of these other ones you could argue aren't. This is for a specific savings account that we may touch more on next time, but it's a savings account that has great tax benefits and encourages you to save into it, but it's not something you're really going to touch and dip into until retirement. That's why it's called a retirement account. And so this is something that is set up through your employer, and usually it's a full-time job. So if you're working, a summer gig, you probably won't have access to one. But when you start your full-time job after college, you'll sign up for their retirement savings account. In this case, it's a 401k. And you can tell them, here, I want $150 taken out and put into this savings account every pay stub. And that'll come out before it even hits your checking account. And so we've got the gross pay of $1,200, and then we've got the taxes taken out, your retirement savings, and your health insurance taken out. And what's hitting your checking account at the end of the day, what the direct deposit number is, it's that $640. That $640, almost 50%, may seem crazy, but that's what we're going to work with. It's hard to get around those other deductions. They're there for a reason, and they're very important. So that 640, that's where we get into, okay, how much should we allocate towards what needs, wants, and other savings for other things than just retirement. Any other comments there, Joey? Does that make sense?
That was great. Thank you, Carolyn. I think that ties right into, I think, the next slide here. Awesome. So what Carolyn was talking about was, what do we actually do with that 600 and something dollars, our net take home pay? Where does that actually go? How do we use that? At 12 points, we like to use the 50-30-20 model. Someone called this a budgeting model. We instead like to think about it as a cash flow model. That cash flow of the 600 and something dollars of our net take home pay, what buckets are we putting that amount into? What percent of that net take home pay on a monthly, weekly basis, what buckets is that entirety going into? So we like to think about 50% should be going towards our needs, covering our everyday needs, such as rent, living expenses, clothing, food, gas, car payments, things like that, what we need to survive. 30% should go towards our wants, fun, basically. We like to work this into our budget, into our cash flow map, because a lot of people struggle with budgeting because they think it's very strict. It's either save or spend on only what we need, spend on our needs instead of our wants. However, and I'll show an example of this in a second, once we're able to be very disciplined with the 20% that comes next, saving for our freedoms. So 20% of our net take home pay going towards our freedoms. That's we call it our freedoms because it's really saving for our goals. It's saving so we're able to achieve financial freedom, hopefully down the line. If we're disciplined and we allocate a minimum of 20% of our take home pay towards that bucket, toward our freedoms bucket, we have the freedom then to actually allocate the 30% towards our wants and towards fun. And I feel like we're more likely to stick with this model, this map, if we're able to balance it. Anything to add there, Carolyn?
No.
So, how to budget based on your actual pay? So, there's a bunch of different considerations into the actual calculation of this and determining, okay, what actually goes, what's actually considered a need versus a want, what's fixed versus what's variable, and actually what within that 20% bucket, where is that actually going? So, Carolyn, can you give us some insight into those things?
Right. So when we're looking at our net take home pay on that paycheck, it was $640. And we're looking at our 50/30/20 budget. One of the things we need to keep an eye on is always be thinking about our short and our long-term goals. So short-term goals within 2 years, I'd say, and that we'll talk about is going to be a safer savings vehicle. And then long-term goals, maybe in 5 or 10 years, you're gonna have to pay for a car, or you'll want a down payment on a home. And I studied abroad, and I spent a lot of my savings on studying abroad, and I had to look forward and think, okay, in a year or two, I'm gonna want to have more money so that I can spend it on these specific goals. So kind of looking at what's coming up short term, what's coming up long term. We have retirement, that's a long term goal, but very, very important to save for. Then how much am I currently spending? How does this line up with my 50/30/20 budget? How much, because how much should I be spending and saving? And we like to say that 20% freedoms bucket of savings is fixed and can only go up. So if your needs and wants maybe don't cover that or are less than that 80%, then throw more into that 20% bucket and increase that bucket first and go to that bucket to increase rather than the other ones. And of course, there's always fluctuations there, but keeping that freedoms and savings steadily at least 20%. What do I want versus what do I need? So when you're looking at that other outside of the savings, what am I spending my money on? Being intentional on looking at, wow, did I really spend $150 last month at Starbucks? And just kind of sitting back and seeing that number and thinking, okay, is that a want? Is that a need? Where is that falling in? Is that cutting me back from other things in life? And I like to use the free version of Rocket Money, and it tells me, it categorizes my spending for me, and it will tell me, $150 at coffee shops and X amount shopping, and it kind of categorizes it for me so I can see what was on bills and housing and rent and groceries, what are those needs, and then how does that compare to my want categories. And just being intentional. We want you to look at and kind of keep an eye and see, where's my money coming in from? Where is it going to? And separating that from savings going to or spending going to. And then identifying and estimating your fixed and variable costs. So when we say covering your everyday needs and making sure you have enough in your checking account um, to hold at least a month's worth of expenses. Well, what are my month's worth of expenses? I may have some fixed ones, like I know exactly how much my rent is going to be on the first of every month, and I know exactly how much my Netflix subscription is because that doesn't change. And then there's the things that do change, but they're still important everyday spending, like groceries and utilities, and just keeping an eye on, okay, what's fixed, what may fluctuate, and making sure I have at least enough to cover readily available a month or two of expenses.
Awesome. So now we have an example of so taking into consideration what Carolyn just discussed, breaking it down into different buckets and seeing actually how much we have left over for the fun stuff after we take care of the priorities. So here in this example, we're assuming a $45,000 net income. And this is where we would take a chance to ask the students what do they think the gross take home pay is based off of the $45,000 net income. It's always interesting to see their guesses. So it varies with between different states and a lot of different considerations, but most likely it'll be around $60,000. That's what the gross take home pay, the job offer salary would be. And based off of that 60,000, we'd be actually netting 45. So on a monthly basis, what this would look like is just over $3,700 a month to spend. And breaking it down with the 50, 30, 20, we'll have 1,800 that goes or allocated towards our needs, our everyday needs. So filling what that does, bringing it back to the beginning, that fills our financial safety bucket. Adding on to that, we'll have $750 going towards our freedoms, towards savings. And we'll get into exactly how we want to allocate that $750 in a second, because there's buckets within the buckets. So if we take care of these two priorities, it brings us to just over $2,600. And what we have remaining for our wants, our fun, going out shopping, going out to eat, is just over $1,100. So what I hope we recognize here is that is built into this cash flow map, this model. We're allocating $1,100 towards the fun, which is not an insignificant amount, where we're giving ourselves the freedom to enjoy ourselves while still saving a significant amount as well. So if we're able to stick to this, especially sticking to the minimum of 20%, so a minimum of 750, we then give ourselves the freedom to actually enjoy ourselves and build that into our model here. And what Carolyn touched upon a little bit ago was we never want to take from the 20%, but let's say our needs don't reach the 50% of our net take home pay. We should allocate a portion of that in addition to the 20%. So add on to the 20% within our freedoms bucket and maybe add a little bit into the wants bucket as well. If we're able to, I would say as young people, the younger generation, we have time on our side. If we're able to take advantage of things like compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world, in time value of money, so really growing returns in the market, letting our money sit in there and grow over time, we will be much better off than having to save more down the line in the future. Time is on our side. We should take advantage of that. And if our everyday needs aren't reaching the 50%, I would encourage, both Carolyn and I would encourage for you to put a good portion of the extra back into the savings, back into the freedoms. Your older self will thank you. You will be able to see that money grow over time. And trust us, the worst possible situation you could be in is being at age 40, 50, having to cut back on expenses, cut back on your wants to be able to have sufficient savings to retire and really enjoy retirement. I know, Carolyn, you've seen that a bunch of times, right?
Absolutely. People never have I ever heard or anyone here, oh, I wish I didn't save as much when I was younger. It's always the opposite. I wish I started saving earlier. I wish I saved more when I was younger. Because as we'll touch on a little bit today, compound interest and more next time. It's so valuable when you add a long time frame and starting early. It's extra special.
Could you just take a second and go into what exactly compound interest is?
Yeah. So let's say um, we have $10,000 and we throw it in a high yield savings account, which we'll talk about in a second. That's 4% APY or interest rate, which means that that bank that's offering this, that you have your money in, is offering to give you 4% of your balance in there if you hold your money at that bank. So they want to hold that money. They want you as a customer and they'll pay you 4% for it. So if you put $10,000 in on January 1st, come December 31st, you should have received about $400, 4% of that 10,000 in interest payments. And that's free money right there that they're giving you for holding your money at that bank. Now your account balance is 10,400. And January 1 comes, that's your balance. December 31st comes, and they're going to pay you 4% on $10,400. Now you're not getting 400 this time because it's a bigger starting balance. You're maybe getting, I don't know, 450. And then that adds, and now you've got $10,850 that's now paying 4% the next year. And that's going to happen every year. And of course, sure, you're making 400 bucks, maybe a little more each year for the first couple years, but make that 25, 30 years. It can grow to some amazing, crazy big numbers. And we'll have examples of that and you'll see how powerful that is. But that's an example of compound interest. It compounds over time on top of each other, every interest payment.
That's why people call it the eighth wonder of the world.
It's beautiful.
You know, like Carolyn said, it may not start out with anything too significant, right? However, over time, as that value grows, it grows exponentially, and that's really how, for importantly, that's really how you build wealth in a way,
Right.
is taking advantage of time value of compounding. That's why, as young people, we're in a great position to start saving early if we're able to.
And in that example, it's a great introduction to just letting your money work for you. You know, you lived your life how you would have that year, just the same, and you made $400 just from this bank account, your money sitting in this bank account versus a traditional one. And yeah, it's pretty powerful.
So we'll actually get into that right now, Carolyn, the different bank accounts and where should we have our money based off of when we're going to spend the money, need the money. So right here we have some of the most basic accounts that we should be considering. Hopefully everyone has a checking account opened up. You'd be surprised. I've talked to college students who do not have checking accounts. It's actually kind of interesting to hear how they're using I think it was Cash App was the it was where they kept their money. It's with the rise of all this digital stuff, it's pretty interesting to see how people use it.
And Joey, what do you
So
use the checking account for? What's the difference between that and your basic savings account?
yeah, so checking account, we use that for everyday spending. So whenever we go out and buy a Starbucks coffee, or hopefully we don't do that too often, but whenever we go out and we tap our card, we swipe our card, that's our money coming directly out of our checking account, using it instantly right there. Liquidity, if anyone's heard of the term liquidity, liquidity is the ability to access your money, how easy it is to access your money. So with a checking account, liquidity is very high because we're able to tap our card and we make that purchase instantly. However, there's a trade-off between liquidity and APY, annual percent yield, or in basic terms, interest rate. What the, like Carolyn said, what the bank is pretty much paying us for us to hold our money with them. So in a checking account, because the money is very liquid, it's very easily accessible. The bank isn't going to be paying us a very high APY, a very high interest rate. So for checking accounts, it's usually around point. I think right now it's like 0.02, zero point zero 0.03. Up here it says 0.07. It varies between banks. However, we should all understand that it's very low. It's the lowest. It's almost an insignificant amount. And when most people open up a checking account, they also may may open up a savings account as well. A traditional savings account at your brick and mortar bank, you go there, and usually it's a checking and a savings account you have. A savings account, however, really doesn't offer that much more interest than a checking account. I think it's still less than a percent. That's why we like to take a look into high yield savings accounts. They are very, very similar to a traditional savings account. However, they're mostly offered from online institutions, or you open them up online instead of a brick and mortar bank. So with a high yield savings, it offers around currently around a three to 3.5% interest rate. And this is where we want to really move everything outside of our monthly spending needs. So keeping our monthly spending funds within the checking account so we can easily access them. Moving everything else beyond that into a high yield savings account to take advantage of the higher interest rate. And so we can start building the bucket for our short to medium term goals, saving for our short to medium term goals. Now, here on the graph, it says that liquidity is medium for a high yield savings account. What we want to be due diligent about is if we're looking to open up one of these accounts, seeing what the minimum required balance is, and if there's any restrictions on a maximum number of withdrawals from the account on a monthly or quarterly basis. Some accounts may have a minimum required balance and may put a restriction on how many times you can withdraw each month. However, most of the ones I've seen don't have those restrictions, and most often when they do, it's an incentive, and they offer even a higher interest rate than a typical high yield savings account. So if checking is our everyday spending bucket, our high yield savings account is our short to medium term savings bucket. Now, what about long term? So we have a few different options for our long term savings bucket. We have an investment account and a retirement account. They're very similar in nature. They're both investment accounts. However, with a retirement account, by its name, it's really meant for retirement savings. So that's money that we're going to let sit there, funds we're going to let sit there, grow, add to over time, but with the expectation that it's going to grow over time and we'll be able to access those funds, the growth in that account at retirement. Investment accounts, we're able to fund these accounts, let them grow in the market over time, hopefully. But there's no restriction like there are with retirement accounts of when we're able to access those funds. Now, the liquidity in these accounts with investment accounts, it's around a medium because we have to actually sell whatever we're invested in to be able to access those funds, and that takes some more time than accessing funds in a checking or high yield savings account does. With a retirement account, because they're meant for retirement and we have to wait till retirement to access them without penalty, the liquidity is low. We're not able to access the funds until down the line into the future. So those are our two long-term savings buckets. And we'll get into this more in the next session, but taking advantage of market growth over time. And also these are for long-term funds we will not need to touch until many years into the future, because in the short term, the market, we'll just take the stock market, can be very volatile. So if we need the funds, we invest into the stock market come next month, 6 months out, next year, or even 2 or 3 years out, the stock market may be actually down from where we invested from our investment point. So we'd be accessing those funds, selling them at a loss. However, over time, the market has been growing. It's gone up. And I think we're Carolyn and I, our generation, the young generation, we've experienced tremendous market growth over our lifetimes. we haven't had too many downturns. However, over time, that's really not the case. It's natural to have up and downs and volatility in the market. So we need to be careful of that, and we need to take that into consideration when we are thinking about what buckets we're putting our money, and especially when we need to access that money. So, some things to consider there. Carolyn, anything that you have to add?
Yeah, just I encourage you all listening to look at how your savings are structured and maybe it's in a traditional, I know mine was for a long time because I just didn't know any better and I don't blame myself for that or anyone else, but it was just in a traditional, local checking and savings account. And learning more and hopefully after this presentation, you'll talk to your parents or do some more research on a high yield savings account. It's just as safe and just as liquid as a regular savings account where you can access the money easily, but you'll get a little bit more interest on it and let your money start to work for you. And prioritizing those savings buckets first and making sure that you, one, can cover your everyday needs, but also cover the next couple months of needs and also saving for those um, big short-term and medium-term goals, such as a car or travel funds or college funds, housing down payments, keeping those in these high-yield savings accounts so that they're not participating in the up and downs of the investment market. And then once you get comfortable with how much you're saving regularly or how much you have in those safe investments, then you could start dipping in and start saving in some retirement and investment accounts and getting more comfortable there. But the importance of having that base savings first, and we call it an emergency fund, which is usually 3 to 6 months of expenses, which gets a little interesting when you're talking to high school and college kids because you may not have a lot of expenses, whereas Joey and I have rent, groceries, bills to pay, health insurance, all of that is important to have on hand for a couple months in case one were to lose their job, etc. So making sure you have a solid savings amount before getting into investing, where you could possibly lose money in the short term for hopefully more money in the long term.
Awesome. So, really emphasizing the point Carolyn and I have made about the importance of starting early, starting to save and invest early. We have a chart here that shows the monthly investment amount to accumulate $1 million by age 65. And we'll get into investments more so in the next session. However, we thought this was a helpful graph to really emphasize the importance of starting early. So at age 25, it takes $160 a month to reach a million by age 65, considering a 10% annual return of the market. If we wait just 10 years, it almost quadruples to $440 by age 35. 45, it is almost 10 times the amount at age 25. And then by 55, it's is that 40 times? 40 times the amount at age 25. So there's a lot of things to consider here with, let's say you're 25 or even in college, you're 20, 21, 22, and someone will show you this graph and you go, well, I have a long time to actually save up for retirement. I can, right now I'm paying for my rent. I like going out with my friends. I'm have different spending needs. I'm going to put off saving for retirement. Okay. So then age 35 rolls around. You maybe have a family, kids, a mortgage payment. So you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I have a mortgage, I have kids I'm spending on, I'm paying for AU baseball or basketball. I still have another 30 years till retirement. I can save later. Okay. All right. So then we wait another 10 years to age 45, and the amount has gone 10 times up from the original savings amount. And now this is where we get into concerning territory that Carolyn and I talked about earlier, where we're nearing retirement. We're maybe 15, 20 years out. And now within 15 years, and maybe you're even 50, right? And so you have really 10, 15 years, you have to fit in 30 years of saving within that 10 to 15 year time period. And that's going to cause drastic changes to your lifestyle, lifestyle you've been living for the past when since you were, maybe 25, starting as an adult to where you are today. So that's a long time living the current lifestyle you've been living. And now you have to actually take a step back. You have to cut back on the things you've been doing for the majority of your life. Carolyn, do you have any other insight into that? I know you talk to people about this all the time with your financial
Yeah.
planning and the models that we run and the different percentages of if it'll work out or not. But do you have
Hmm.
any insight into that?
Yeah, I just know that that 55-year-old is saying $160 a month. What was I thinking? That is nothing compared to what I'm trying to scrape together now. A lot of people don't have $5,000 a month sitting around ready to be saved. So, like Joey said, there's dramatic lifestyle changes. If these are the goals right here and they need an extra 5,000 a month to be saved, that's dramatic and that's hard to do if they can pull it off. So, hopefully this is a little telling of, starting small, doesn't have to be big numbers when you're young. And starting small, starting consistent, starting early.
And Carolyn, is $1 million saved up for retirement? Is that in today's world, is that enough?
You know, it depends on a million other factors. Um, it I want to say no, it's not, but it really depends on your family situation and how much and what your lifestyle is like where you live.
Mhm. Especially with inflation too. $1 million used to be
Right.
a good amount of safe
Yes. Yep.
thought, but not really anymore, it seems like.
No, it's very different than when our parents were kids. $1 million was the target number, and now if you were to look up what $1 million was 35 years ago versus what it is in today's dollars, I'm sure it's something
Yeah,
crazy.
no, totally. So here's a quote that we at 12 Points love. The difference between inspiration and transformation is implementation. This underscores the importance of not just, like I mentioned in the beginning, not just listening and observing to this information, but actually implementing it into our lives so we can see that transformation, see the difference that really makes the difference in our lives. So, Carolyn, do you want to run us through some of the action items that people can take with them?
Sure. So, like I said, if you've got a job, even if it's just a summer job, part-time, whatever it may be, if you're getting a direct deposit and you've never seen a pay stub before, I really encourage you to go online, find that portal. There's somewhere where there is a pay stub behind that direct deposit and just look at it. What am I making hourly? How much did I work that week? If you're a waitress, how much is the restaurant paying me versus how much is coming in tips? How much is going to taxes? Are there any other weird line items that I don't know what they mean. Maybe I'll ask my parents. There's other deductions you can have. But just looking at, okay, then what is my take home pay? That's what hit my checking account. Oh, and putting it all together and seeing it for your situation. And then start being intentional with your money. Start piecing together where is my money going after it comes in, how much is going where, can I automate from my direct deposit that 20% goes straight to this other savings account that's hiding from my spending and it's off to the side. And that's a great way to do it. And then it never really hits your checking account and you're checking that save 20% box without even thinking, but being intentional on where is this money going each month. And then open a high yield savings account. If your money is sitting in a traditional savings account making, 0.2% maybe, look into talk to your parents, email us about opening a high yield savings account to make your money start working for you and introduce the concept of compound interest and your money working for you. And then have a conversation with your parents. We didn't touch on this before, but expectations around Maybe you're getting your license soon and you don't know if your parents will have a car for you, or maybe you should be saving for one and thinking about, your next paycheck, or the cash you get from the ice cream shop that you work in the summer. Maybe you should be sticking some to the side for a car. Or once you start driving, are you going to have to pay for gas? What are the expectations there? And around college, maybe your parents will help with the tuition payment, but what about the food and the going out and all the extra costs that you have when you're in college? And just talk to them a little bit about expectations and say, hey, mom and dad, I, you know, really appreciate everything you've done for me and that you'll buy me a car and that you'll pay for my tuition maybe, but I just want to know what are the costs that I'm not thinking of that I should be saving for because I want to be ready for them and not be coming to you and asking for extra money. I want to save on my own and be prepared. And they'll love that, and that's absolutely the best approach you should take.
Awesome. That sounds great, Carolyn. I think that wraps it up. I don't have anything else to add here. Usually we would ask for if anyone had questions. If anyone does have questions after watching this, please feel free to reach out to Carolyn or I. Carolyn, we should have put the slide in here with, with our emails
With
on
our
it.
emails.
My email is Joey, at 12points.com, 12 points spelled out. And Carolyn's is Carolyn at 12points.com. So if anyone has any questions after watching this, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to hop on a call with you. We can go over the deck, any questions that you have, and then also if you have any individual stuff you'd like to talk about as well, we'd be more than happy to chat. Any last words to wrap up, Carolyn?
Just the session two version of this is about credit cards, loans in general, student loans versus credit card debt, basics of investing and some of those different accounts. And that'll be some exciting, more detailed stuff, but just as important as today's baseline session. And there'll be a video on that, or if you can join us on August 19th of 2026.
Perfect.
All right.
Awesome. Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Joey.
Well, thank you all to hopefully watching. Thanks, Carolyn. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was. Bye.